What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the DFS Dose YouTube channel, Twitter, wherever you may be viewing this Saturday night, late night live stream. Hope everybody's been having a good week up to this point. What you doing, bro? What you doing over there? Spilling shit?
Just drinking some vitamin water, you know?
Little vitamin water for the vibes. How you feeling about this week 11 slate? A lot of turbulence, kind of like last week where injuries just sort of shifted everything in the direction we were thinking about going early in the week.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good, especially from a cash game perspective. I think it's going to be very similar to last week where one or two lineups are going to make up a majority. Well, not a majority. I don't want to say majority, but a lot of the cash game lineups are going to be a train, in my opinion. And I think there are two optimal cash game lineups right now that mostly everybody should be running. I mean, that's not going to be the case, but there's two that stand clear cut above the rest.
Well, let's get through some of the top plays. If anybody at any point while watching the stream has any questions, feel free to shoot it in the chat. Season-long DFS, whatever your vibe is, we will get to the questions. Starting off with Ryan, feeling a tad different this week in DK Cash, and lists his lineup here. And a lot of these guys I think are, this is almost identical to sort of the build that I'm thinking of running. And you're on the right core. You might have a 1v1 or a 2v2, but you're right in that optimal lane. So I think that's a really solid place to be at Saturday night before lock.
Yep.
You want to start off with quarterback here?
Yes, sir. All right. Quarterback. So I think for cash games, we're really going to be looking at two or three quarterbacks, and we have obviously Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott in the clear-cut best game of the week. Total of 56 points right now. Just an absolute smash game from a fantasy perspective. I prefer Patrick Mahomes straight up just because I think the Cowboys can come into Kansas City and play well enough and control the game on the ground. And that might limit Dak's upside a little bit. Obviously, if you need the 400, Dak is great. And in any game script where the Cowboys are losing, he's going to smash. But I think just from a floor ceiling perspective, Patrick Mahomes is a little bit better. And I think the Chiefs could be down in this game, although they are big favorites. I don't know. I kind of like the Cowboys to win outright. If you're in a state where betting is legal, I like Cowboys money line in the spots, but those two guys are the cash game quarterbacks in my opinion. But there is a third. If we go down the list, it's this guy right here, Tua Tagovailoa. I know you're not really into him this week, but in every game that he started and finished, he's had 16 plus DraftKings points. It's a good spot going up against the New York Jets, who probably have the worst passing defense in the entire NFL, and they just get torched by everybody that they face. And he's 5,500. It's a week where salary is a little bit tighter than normal. I don't know. I think Tua is definitely cash viable. I know you don't, but I definitely think if you want to go to Tua, I think that's fine.
The issue that I have with it is just when you look at things from like a zoomed out perspective, do you want to play a quarterback from a game that consists of the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets? Or do you want to play a game that, a quarterback from a game that consists of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Dallas Cowboys? And that game has a 12-point higher total. So we're literally projecting 2 full touchdowns higher to be scored in that game, just from a Vegas perspective alone. And the spots that people are going to pay up to save with Tua are at the tight end position when they're going to prioritize players like Cole Kmet over John Bates. And it's going to be a defense when they're playing somebody in that 3K defensive range instead of punting it off. So I would rather take the savings at defense and tight end, two positions that we use on a week-to-week basis to save salary and get a stronger quarterback play, because the game environment is so solid for those top two guys. So to me, I don't really want to consider Tua in this spot. Also, I mean, you mentioned the Jets having the worst pass defense. Some DVP metrics have them having by far, like historically, the worst run defense. So I think there's scenarios where Miami, puts up their 24 implied team total or even goes above it, and Tua still doesn't have a good game because it's all going to be Gaskin on the ground. So I don't know. To me, I don't personally consider Tua cash viable this week.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get where you're coming from, but Miami is third in terms of pass rate in the entire NFL, only behind the Jets and Bucks. So you're going to get a ton of passing volume out of Tua. He's 5,500. It's a good spot. He's probably going to put up 20 plus. Yeah, he doesn't have that 35, 38 point ceiling that Dak and Mahomes does, but he's going to project very well. He's a pretty solid value right now, in my opinion, and I wouldn't fault anybody for playing him in cash. And as it stands right now, I think he's going to be a top 2 quarterback in terms of ownership. And I think personally that's okay. I mean, obviously you're sacrificing a little bit in terms of game environment, but probably from an overall lineup construction standpoint, it definitely does make some sense to pay down at quarterback to get, better projections at every position, and instead of punting to, a guy like John Bates or Jets defense, even though, those are 2 positions that we do usually punt at. I think this week it's okay if you go up a little bit.
So I agree with your original point that I prefer Mahomes to Dak Prescott, but how important would it be for you to find that 400? Like, how big is the difference for you? Because to me, I mean, this, like, I don't want to say that salary is tight this week, because there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of different ways you can go, but at the same time, you are going to be in a position with where the constructions force you into tight spaces, where it's like, if you go with this construction, yeah, that 400 actually does come in clutch. The difference between Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill, the difference between Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott. So, like, how much of it is it of a priority for you to get up to Mahomes from Dak? Or are you okay if you end up on Dak?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dak is pretty fine. If you have the 400 just laying around, then I would upgrade. But I think both are really close. And, as it stands right now, Dak is probably the cash game quarterback. And I know some sites are projecting him to be like lower owned than Mahomes and Tua, but I think he's definitely going to have a decent bit of ownership, as he just fits the optimal build, in my opinion. Because that $400 kind of does make a difference when, we have a bunch of must plays at, running back and receiver, in my opinion, that are a little bit pricey. So
I agree. We have a question here from Ryan. Murray's looking unlikely in a 12-man season-long league. I can go and get Fields, Simeon, Daniel Jones, or Big Ben. Thoughts? I don't know. You could take this one. I think it's either Fields or Jones.
I mean, it's 100% Fields.
Yeah.
100%. As you can see here, he's been playing better. He's been scoring more fantasy points. Ravens, I tweeted this, but the Ravens are quietly the worst defense in terms of passing yards per game allowed to opposing quarterbacks. So this spot at home for Justin Fields against the Ravens isn't as bad as it seems. And I mean, he's 5,700. He's going to come with no ownership. Personally, I don't know if I can go there. I think I don't know. I just think it's very risky to play Justin Fields, but in season long, if you need somebody, it's definitely Justin Fields.
I agree with that. Thanks, Regina. Appreciate you. So, I mean, that about sums it up for cash. Like, yeah, it's really just those 3 guys that you're deciding between. On the podcast, we talked about Cam Newton. That I don't think is cash viable anymore, just because of the threat of PJ Walker. I would not expect PJ Walker to play too much, especially when they get down towards scoring position. I think that's all going to be Cam, just because of the versatility that his running upside opens up for the offense. But I mean, even if PJ Walker plays like 30% of snaps, that's a lot to give up at the quarterback position when every other player is playing 100% of their team snaps. So I wouldn't consider Cam anymore as a cash viable play.
Yeah, it's just, it's just like how many snaps is he realistically going to lose? And that's kind of the risk involved with playing Cam Newton. I still think he's a pretty solid play just because he is like very cheap, only $1,100 above the minimum, for a player of Cam Newton's caliber, especially, in the red zone, on the goal line, and just his rushing ability in general kind of gives him, a very large ceiling. And this would be a situation where if you play him, I would only play him in GPPs. And if the ownership is lower, if he's high owned, I'm not going to play him. If he's low owned, I'll play Cam Newton, and you don't even have to stack him just because he's cheap enough to where if he scores 2 rushing touchdowns at 5,100, and he's most likely not pulling anybody with him in that case, a naked Cam Newton seems like the optimal strategy for tournaments.
Yeah, it looks like right now he's going to be sitting around like 10%, which is very comparable to Tua. And I mean, if that's the conversation, I think I just would go Tua.
Yeah, I probably prefer Tua to Cam Newton as well. But I mean, it's very close because it's like I said, like how many snaps do we realistically think he loses? Like what upside is PJ Walker bringing to the Panthers offense, right? Like, are they going to come in and are they going to let him come in and throw like 10 attempts or who knows? I mean, for cash games, I think it's a little too risky just because of the information that we have right now. And Tua would be my lean in cash, but in tournaments, I like taking shots on Cam Newton for sure.
Are you stacking him?
No. Like I just said, he's cheap enough to where if he reaches his ceiling, he doesn't really need to pull anybody with him, in my opinion.
So opening up the discussion to tournaments, who are some of your favorite options at the quarterback position? And I guess, I mean, how many of your lineups, say you're building 10 lineups, how many of them are starting with Mahomes or Dak?
Probably a majority, probably 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
Going to have a very tight quarterback pool this week. Don't really feel like you have to get too crazy in terms of your quarterback exposure. There's only a couple good spots on this entire slate. I think Josh Allen, Prescott, Mahomes, and Joe Burrow are probably going to make up the core of my quarterbacks in tournaments. I don't really care for any of these guys below 6K. Don't care for Fields, Wentz, Tua in tournaments. I think he has low upside. Cam Newton is fine. Jimmy Garoppolo is fine. I think the majority of my lineups are going to have those 4 quarterbacks, and it's that simple for me this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think that those are the core 4. I'm really interested in tournament lineups with Josh Allen, who I think is going to be really contrarian, and I don't think that there's really any Colts bringbacks that are going to be massively owned, and I think some of them have a lot of high upside. So, Jonathan Taylor specifically. So, I mean, I think that you could build a Josh Allen, Diggs, Jonathan Taylor lineup, and if you want to add like Dawson Knox or something like that, that's viable too. But that is going to be like, Allen, one of the highest ceilings, if not the highest ceiling at the quarterback position. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor for the running back position, and they're going to go under owned. So that's one of my favorite builds to go with in tournaments. And Joe Burrow for sure. I think that, I mean, this is sort of getting away from quarterback, but I think if you play T. Higgins in tournaments, I want to be doing it exclusively as part of something with Joe Burrow. Otherwise, I'm going to find a way off of him because he's going to be massive chalk at the wide receiver position. But if he hits his ceiling, I think that Joe Burrow is having a really good game too, because that probably involves at least 1 touchdown.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think Joe Burrow and this game in general is, the contrarian game to target, and especially to pivot off of if you're behind after the 1 o'clock games, just to get off of, the heavy ownership of the Chiefs and Cowboys game. And T. Higgins has a good price. He's 5,400. Tyler Boyd is 4,800. Jamar Chase is 7,200. So you got pivots at every spot, in my opinion, off of the Cowboys and Chiefs game. And I definitely think this is a very good spot for Joe Burrow. And the Bengals passing offense in general. And I have a pretty large sum of money riding on Joe Burrow on Prize Picks, as you could see right here. Need him to go over his passing yards and over Tyler Boyd receiving yards for $1,000 tomorrow. So definitely all in on a Joe Burrow game, and I definitely love the Bengals wide receivers as well. And hopefully it hits, or I will cry myself to sleep tomorrow.
The only other two quarterbacks that I have in consideration, maybe for one lineup each, would be like Russell Wilson and Ryan Tannehill. Wilson is definitely thin, but I want to buy the bounce back. I think that he's a much better player than what we saw last week, and we have a massive sample to support that. I know that they've had some comments about wanting to run the ball, but Chris Carson is out for the rest of the year. I mean, I don't know how effective they're going to be running the ball with Alex Collins and Rashad Penny and Travis Homer. Like, it's nasty. So if Murray sits, that obviously kind of muddies this entire game and probably gets us off of playing the majority of players in this game, but I don't mind a Russ to Lockett skinny stack in some spots if Kyler Murray plays, but it's a decision we're going to have to make probably ahead of time without knowing that information, since this is a 425 game.
Yeah, I'm probably just going to fade this game altogether. Especially since it's in the 4 p.m. window. I mean, I'd rather just play the Cowboys Chiefs. I'd rather play the Bengals Raiders game. Like you mentioned, kind of too much uncertainty surrounding Kyler Murray's status, and that will obviously hurt the total of this game quite a bit. It's at 47.5 right now. I think Vegas is projecting him in, but the Cardinals do have a bye next week. Kind of be smart to just hold them out for this easily winnable game against Russell Wilson, who's probably still dealing, with some sort of limitations with his finger injury, right? Kind of came back a little too early. The price is cheap, but the Cardinals have, the fifth best scoring defense in the NFL. They're only giving up 18 points per game. Seahawks are at home, but I don't know. I just don't have too much interest in the Seahawks offense. And then you get the Pete Carroll rhetoric where they're like, we need to run the ball more. We get smoked 17-0. We got to run the ball. We got to establish the run. Got to control the clock. And I could see them coming out and just grinding Alex Collins and
that's disgusting.
Rashad Penny.
It's horrifying. Can't. Ugh.
There's only about 3 or 4 games that I want to play this week, and that's the Cowboys Chiefs, the Bills Colts, the Raiders and Bengals, and I kind of like the Niners too. I kind of like the Niners in GPP.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's about it.
Well, Aaron in the chat asks, is this a 3 running back week given all of the value? I also like squeezing in Hill, Gallup, Higgins, and Bateman. I think those are all cash viable wide receivers, but we can move to the running back position. And I mean, I did it last week, jammed in Christian McCaffrey into cash when nobody was doing it. I think a lot of people are going to do it this week, and I've got to tell you, I'm going to be one of them. CMC at 8,900 is a smash in my opinion. He should never be below 10K on DraftKings.com.
Yeah, no, CMC is a lock in my opinion. He's projecting, as like the top running back value right now. Don't think it gets much easier than, locking in CMC. And I do personally believe it is a 3 running back week. If we go down here and look in the mid range, we have AJ Dillon, who's 6,200. James Conner is 6,100. I think AJ Dillon is a must. I think his workload is a little bit more secure than James Conner. And then you obviously have, Rodgers starting there. It's a good spot going up against the Vikings. And like we just talked about, Kyler Murray could miss. So I definitely prefer Dillon to Conner.
Yeah.
And he's shown that he can play well in the passing game, as you could see right here. If he gets 2 to 3 catches and, 18 to 20 attempts, you'll take that as 6,200 and he'll probably smash. And he's probably one of the slate's best bets to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
So I think you lock in CMC, you lock in AJ Dillon, and then Aaron, he mentioned the running back value. We got a couple guys down here. We have Mark Ingram, who's 5,400, and we have Jeff Wilson Jr., who's 5,100. I think we're both on the same page that we prefer Jeff Wilson to Mark Ingram this week.
So I think if they were both 5,100, I might prefer Mark Ingram. I think that his role as a pass catcher is quite a bit more secure. So I think his floor is a little bit higher than Jeff Wilson Jr.'s. I mean, I think that even with the anti-Trey Sermon rhetoric that we have out of Kyle Shanahan, I wouldn't be surprised if he got 10 touches in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if Kyle Juszczyk vultured some of the pass catching work from Jeff Wilson Jr. I mean, Mark Ingram, I think, is going to get a massive lion's share. Even Ty Montgomery is out in this spot. Like, they're going to have no choice but to force Mark Ingram the ball. But like I mentioned, you know, depending on what build you're in, you're gonna need that 300. So the $300 difference to me is not significant enough that I will sacrifice anything to get up to Mark Ingram if Jeff Wilson Jr. fits. And the current build that I have is that scenario. So I slightly prefer Mark Ingram, but I am currently leaning towards playing Jeff Wilson Jr. just because that 300 is coming in clutch, and I don't think the difference is big enough to sacrifice anything for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Prefer Jeff Wilson Jr. I think Mark Ingram's role is a little bit better, but you're paying $300 more for it. And it kind of would mess up the optimal lineup construction by going Ingram over Jeff Wilson. But I still think he is cash viable if you really have a preferred lean towards Mark Ingram. But I will note that Tony Jones Jr. is activated off of IR, so he should be the RB2. And I think they will run him a little bit. So it won't be like last week where, Ingram had 90% of the running back touches, but he's still going to project very well.
The Jags have also been sneakily good against running backs, which is a bit of a concern for a player like Jeff Wilson Jr., who doesn't really have any sort of pass game expectation, I think. But to me, it makes Jeff Wilson Jr. a play that you are fine making in cash games. But I think that, honestly, almost, Ingram, I think Jeff Wilson Jr., I think you can get away from them pretty easily in tournaments. It's not like last week where you had to eat the Dearness Johnson chalk. Like, you had to eat a certain amount of Mark Ingram chalk in tournaments. Like, I think you can fully get away from these players in tournaments.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I probably wouldn't play Jeff Wilson in GBP. I think there's some good pivots just in that game on his same team, which we'll talk about, when we get to wide receiver and tight end. And there's some pivots, around those two guys as well. Honestly, like, I don't think Jeff Wilson Jr. is a great play, just because I don't even think he's going to be like involved in the receiving game, a lot. And if the Niners do get ahead, like, he's going to get attempts and he's going to get yards. But I think the ceiling on Jeff Wilson Jr. is just so low.
Like, you need him to get 100 yards and a touchdown to get 20.
Yeah.
And 30 is probably out of range. So I think he's a pretty easy fade in tournaments, especially if his ownership, I mean, some sites have him projected for like 30 plus. So, I mean, if he's that highly owned, I would rather take a shot on a lot of these guys in this range. David Montgomery is one of them. Myles Gaskin. How do you feel about Gaskin? I think that Gaskin is like fringe cash viable, but it's the same sort of thing where it's like Ingram is 300 cheaper. Jeff Wilson is 600 cheaper, but I mean, the matchup for Gaskin is so high, and he's definitely the best pass catcher of this group of running backs sub 6K.
Yeah, I don't mind Gaskin. It is a good spot for him. As you mentioned, the Jets are just one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. They give up the third most rushing yards. They give up the most DraftKings points allowed. They give up over 7 catches per game, which is second worst to opposing running backs. So they just get obliterated by opposing running backs, especially through the air. And we know that Gaskin is a great pass catcher as well. So it's a great spot for him. He's definitely cash viable for sure. Don't know if he fits the optimal construction, but I'm definitely going to play some Myles Gaskin this week, especially in GPPs. And, it's an on week for him. every odd week is an on week for Myles Gaskin. Every even week is a dead week. And this is an odd week. We're in week 11. So
Sounds like you guys will be Wilson over Ingram, Bateman over Higgins with Cleveland's D. Sounds like you guys will be Wilson over Ingram, Bateman over Higgins. No, Higgins is the first wide receiver that we're playing, personally. You have to play T. Higgins this week. I mean, the lineup I have would be Wilson and T. Higgins. Absolutely.
Yeah.
James Conner is kind of like the odd man out, I think, just because you can save some salary by going down to these other guys, and A.J. Dillon is priced $100 more, and I think is significantly safer. So how do you feel about James Conner this week? Are you just going to be staying away just because if you're not playing him in cash, like if you're playing CMC, Dillon, and one of these value guys, you're not going to be playing him in cash. And in tournaments, the range of outcomes is really wide. The percentage of times that he's going to hit his ceiling is very slim, and the ownership is going to be extremely high. So to me, he just lines up as a player that it's like, there are some reasons why you would want to play him, but it doesn't really make sense for any format. So I don't know how to handle James Conner. I think that the best way would be just stay away.
Yeah, I don't know. It is still a good spot, a very good spot. Going up against Seattle. I don't know. I mean, he's projecting for, around 20% ownership, which is a little bit lower than, Jeff Wilson, Mark Ingram, AJ Dillon. So he's not going to be the highest owned running back, but he's definitely not going to be the lowest owned running back. And when you compare him to Dillon, I definitely prefer Dillon over Connor. Yeah, so I don't know. I probably won't play much James Conner this week. I think he's just very touchdown reliant, especially if you want him to hit his ceiling. And I think the touchdown expectation with Colt McCoy, if he starts, is very low. So maybe it's like a pivot situation.
Yeah.
That
a late game pivot if you have to.
Yeah, and I think late swap is definitely going to be needed this week. You're definitely going to have to pay attention to your lineups around 4:00. Be ready to make any swaps, and I definitely think James Conner would be a good swap if you leave the flex open. And I don't know, I think Josh Jacobs would be just the pivot, or James Conner, whatever. Most of the chalk running backs are going at 1:00 though, right? So
they are, yeah.
I don't know. You would have to leave a flex open for Connor, and
Tyler Lockett's right there. Same
sounds like a lot of work. So I'll probably fade James Conner.
Yeah, I mean, got it. Yeah, I'm not playing James Conner. So I mean that basically sums up our cash pool. I think CMC and AJ Dillon are essentially locks, and you're going to be probably playing a value guy in cash, whether it's Wilson, Ingram, or Gaskin. You're lean there. For tournaments, there's some interesting ways you can go. I think at the top end, the guys that stand out to me the most are Jonathan Taylor. Taylor to me would specifically only be played in lineups where I'm game stacking that Bills game. I don't want to one-off with Jonathan Taylor. He's too expensive. But, I mean, I think that if he's hitting his ceiling, the Bills are doing something, on offense, whether it's in comeback mode or whether they already got there and Taylor's getting there through elevated pass game work and comeback mode. So I like Jeff Wilson, or I like Jonathan Taylor as part of Bills stacks. And I think Ezekiel Elliott is one of the best leverage plays on the entire slate, because in situations where the Chiefs and Dallas game isn't living up to expectations, it's probably because Dallas is up and they're running the ball and they're slowing the pace of the game down. And Zeke is direct leverage off of the Dallas passing game. CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup, who are going to be massively owned. Zeke Elliott to me is he's supreme leverage this week. And he's projecting to be like 5% owned, which is absurd.
Yeah, you're getting a massive ownership discount on Zeke. He is priced up, and I think the ceiling with him, just where he is at in his career, is very low. I don't think he's going to break big runs as he used to. So you're really just going to have to rely on him to get a bunch of volume in or on the ground, and then mix in through the air a little bit. Like you definitely are going to need 3-4 catches out of Zeke and 18 to 22 touches. I don't know. I think Tony Pollard will mix in quite a bit in this spot. Um, I think he's just too expensive, to be honest. So I probably won't play much Zeke, but it definitely makes sense from a game theory perspective to play him, and he's great leverage off of Dak and CD and Gallup, and it makes sense if you believe the Cowboys are going to be leading and winning the whole game. But I just can't. I just can't play him at 7,700. I'd rather honestly play Nick Chubb, like no cap.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer Nick Chubb straight up to Ezekiel Elliott.
The problem to me is that Nick Chubb coming off of, I mean, not an injury, COVID, but with Nick Chubb coming back and Dearness Johnson playing so well, and Tim Boyle starting for the Lions, like I don't see them running Nick Chubb a ton of times in this game. He's going to have to break a massive run and get a 100-yard bonus and 2 touchdowns to get there, which, don't get me wrong, he definitely could at home against Detroit with a backup quarterback. But I don't know. It's just like same sort of thing where like he's priced at 7,800. If he was even like 6,800, then I would be all over it. But the price tag is just too expensive for him in a game where I don't think the workload is going to match.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just overthinking it. They're going to be up. He's going to get touches. Dearness Johnson will probably work in some, but in game scripts where the Browns are leading, he's going to get 20 plus touches easily. And this is the Lions rush defense we're talking about. I think Nick Chubb would probably be the best bet to score a touchdown, not AJ Dillon. AJ Dillon would be number 2. But Joe Mixon at 7,600, I think, is a great GPP play as well. Nobody's going to play him. His upside is pretty high, as we've seen, 25 plus in 3 out of the last 4 games. He is involved in the receiving game, which you love to see out of Mixon. I've been a notorious Joe Mixon hater, but
yeah, you have.
The upside is there. The game environment is there. We have a total of 50.5 in this game, and you're going to get ownership. You're going to get a significant ownership discount on Joe Mixon, currently projecting to be under 5% owned. And a lot of these running backs in this range specifically are going to go under owned. So I like targeting this range, especially with Joe Mixon. I love Nick Chubb. Dalvin Cook, I think, is a great GPP play once again, 8,200. Did you see that tweet where it's like he's been stopped at the 1-yard line like 5 times and then hasn't scored a touchdown the next play at all? So I think he's due for some positive touchdown regression, and at home, Packers defense, I think this could be a Dalvin Cook eruption spot.
Yeah, I like that. I like it. Is it a situation where are you stacking that game at all? Would that be like a Cook Adams correlation play? Would it be a one-off? Like, how are you playing Dalvin Cook? That's the only thing that would confuse me.
Yeah, I think a Dalvin Cook one-off makes sense, and I'm definitely not stacking this game. Adams is going to be chalky, and you can get a good amount of like Rodgers production just through Adams, right? Like Adams is the only capable receiver they have. And then Aaron Jones is out. So you know who the ball is going to, and you can get 95% of the Packers offense through those 2 players. So you definitely don't have to stack the Packers and play Rodgers. I think Rodgers is definitely out of consideration at 7K, especially when Dak is 72 and Mahomes is 76. Do not play Aaron Rodgers this week. That's just terrible process.
Tell the people. Yeah, don't do it.
Definitely not in play. Think Dalvin Cook is a great one-off. Personally, I'm fading JT. Just a tough spot for him.
Really?
But that could come back to bite me because this dude is elite.
Yeah. He is. Brady versus Alex asks thoughts on Mahomes, Wilson, Dillon, Adams, Gallup, Bateman, Waller, Ingram, and Washington. Defense. I mean, I don't think that you should be paying up for tight end if we're talking cash games. And I personally am not playing Waller unless it's specifically in a correlated game stack with Joe Burrow. So I'm not about that part of it. I think the rest of the core is very solid and definitely cash viable, but yeah, Waller's a no-go for me. You can do a lot with that by getting off of Darren Waller down to Cole Kmet or John Bates and finding some extra space to spend that money. Kamish says, I am in and I'm drunk again. Cheers, buddy. Not drunk yet, but I'm trying to get there.
And we just got a report that Kyler Murray is likely to sit once again. So we're going to get another Colt McCoy-led game for the Cardinals.
Scratch everything I said about playing Russ Wilson and Tyler Lockett and full fade James Conner. That game is untouchable.
I have no interest in that game, to be honest. Yeah. But I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts at running back? I mean, I think from a long shot, my guy is still the same, and that's Dante Foreman. This week, 4,900 at home against Houston. I mean, I'm always going to play running backs against Houston. He out-touched AP last week. Jeremy McNichols is out, so you take 1/3. 1/3 of the touches away, and they probably go to Foreman. I think if he gets 15 to 18 touches at 4,900, I think that's definitely within the range. Yeah, and he could easily smash.
I think that Foreman is going to be about 3 times less owned than Jeff Wilson Jr., maybe even a wider gap. And I don't think that Jeff Wilson Jr. is 3 times more likely to outscore Foreman. You know what I'm saying? So I think that Foreman makes a lot of sense as a GPP play, especially in a spot where Tennessee's going up against Houston. And I know they don't have Derrick Henry anymore, but I can't see them wanting to just flood Tannehill with pass attempts, especially if they're up. So yeah, I like Foreman. I also like David Montgomery at 5,500. It's not an amazing matchup specifically against Baltimore. Baltimore is very stingy against the run. If you look at the Baltimore defense's rushing defense against running backs, it's very similar to Jacksonville's from a number standpoint. So I don't think you're really giving up a ton. If everyone's hyped to play Jeff Wilson Jr. against the Jags, but nobody's going to play David Montgomery, who at least has a pass catching role. I prefer David Montgomery. And I also think that DeMont succeeds in spots where the Bears are ahead. And I like the Bears to outright win this game. I know that they're 5-point dogs, but the stuff with Lamar Jackson, who's 50-50, Houston in the chat says I'm kind of interested in Lamar if he's in. I think Lamar plays, but even still, I think the Bears coming off of a bye, Justin Fields playing better. Lamar Jackson has barely been at practice all week. They've been up and down as an offense. I think that the Bears are very live as a dog in this spot, and David Montgomery is not going to be highly owned. So 5,500, I think he's an interesting GPP play.
Yeah, I don't mind David Montgomery. I don't know. I think his ceiling is just very low. I mean, obviously he could score 20 plus points. And if he does that at 5,500, you'll take that all day. I just have my concerns about the Bears offense still, and whether or not they can keep the momentum going forward. But they are at home, facing the Ravens, who might be without Lamar. He's currently 50-50 supposedly to play. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind David Montgomery. I mean, I really have no opinion on him, to be honest. I probably won't play much of him, but
I think we've touched on every running back that is viable on DraftKings. We can move to the wide receiver position. And we can start at the top with Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. Both of them are going to be highly owned. Both of them are solid plays, projecting as top 5 values in a points per dollar sense on the slate. Who's your lean right now? Adams versus Tyreek Hill. I know my answer.
I mean, I definitely prefer Tyreek in this spot.
Yep, as do I.
You get a $200 discount pretty much same type of target share between both players, same slight breaking upside from both players, and you're just getting a way better game environment in that Chiefs game. Chiefs have a 29.5 total right now. Packers have a 24.5 total, so 5 points higher. The total is also, a little bit higher as well, and the game environment I think is just explosive. So give me Tyreek over Devontae Adams, although Adams is projecting a little bit better.
I agree. I mean, I would much prefer to play Tyreek Hill in this spot, just straight up. So Adams is fine, but I think he's hard to play, and because of the ownership and because the game environment is so much weaker than Tyreek. So I don't know. I don't want to say I'm full fading Devontae Adams. That's probably not optimal, but I just think that there are other options that I prefer a little bit more. Even CD Lamb for a discount, a nice juicy discount is interesting.
Yeah, I think this is a Devontae Adams eruption game, so I'm definitely going to play a lot of Devontae Adams in GPP. I just think in cash, I want as much exposure as I can get to the Cowboys and Chiefs. But mark my words, this is a Devontae Adams eruption game. I'm talking like 38 points, so maybe
God,
might have to play might have to play him in cash. To be honest, if I think that.
Who's your guys' locks for wide receiver in cash? Hill, Gallup, Bateman, Higgins. Hill. I don't want to call Hill a lock because you can play Devontae Adams over him and it's not bad. I would say that Gallup and Higgins are locks, though. Gallup, obviously, with Amari Cooper out, the price tag is just too good to ignore, all the way down at the bottom of the barrel at 4,200. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't get any easier than playing Michael Gallup. He's a stone lock. T. Higgins as well, I think, is a stone lock at 5,400. Essentially identical usage to Jamar Chase, but he's $1,800 cheaper. He's got a great matchup. I don't know. I mean, what do you want to say about T. Higgins here? I think that it's really almost impossible to get away from in cash, although some people seem like they're willing to go down to Bateman.
Yeah, I mean, Higgins at 5,400, it's just a good spot for the Bengals passing offense. The Raiders have one of the worst scoring defenses in the NFL. The Bengals are coming off of a bye. They've trended to be more pass heavy over the last couple of weeks. And he's still underpriced for, his pretty good role in this offense. And, he just hasn't got there yet. I think this could be a spot where he scores, a touchdown. And at 5,400, I think he's the best mid-range receiver, and he fits the lineup perfectly. So I think T. Higgins is a must. I think Michael Gallup is a must. You're getting the Cowboys wide receiver 2 as it stands right now with Amari Cooper on the COVID list at 4,200 in a 56 game total. I mean, it doesn't get much easier than that. So you're locking in those two guys. Hill, like you said, is probably not a lock because you can't play Adams. I don't think Bateman is a lock, especially with the uncertainty around Lamar, but he's definitely a great cash play. I just preferred the 3 running back build over the 4 wide receiver build this week, just because we do have CMC, we do have AJ Dillon, Jeff Wilson, Mark Ingram. I think are all pretty standout plays. They're going to project better than Rashad Bateman by a wide margin. So you definitely go with the 3 running back route in cash once again this week. And, when you're locking in Gallup and Higgins, that leaves you with Adams or Hill, and then Bateman is the odd man out. So,
yep. Could not agree more. I'm looking at a Rashad Bateman ownership projection that has him under 10%. That can't be right. Right?
I mean, I could see him being around 10 to 15% for sure.
If he's in that range, I think he's an amazing pivot off of Gallup, who's going to be like 30 plus. But yeah, I think Bateman is. I don't know. I think he's going to be higher on than that personally.
Debo and cash, nah, you can't play Debo or Diggs or Justin Jefferson in cash just when you have Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams within $600 of them. It's just bad process if you play Debo over Tyreek Hill in my opinion.
I agree. That being said, Debo's been an absolute machine. I mean, this man, he's going to get touches. Like, he's going to get running back touches. He had 5 attempts last week, 5 targets, 10 touches, 30 points. Like, this man is absolutely electric this year. Debo's that dude. And I doubted Debo for a long time. Like, I was all over Ayuk over Debo this year. Couldn't have been more wrong. Debo is that dude. But no, I don't think you play him in cash games this week.
Yeah, he's a great GPP play, and I think we could just talk about wide receivers for tournaments. The cash core at wide receiver is so small. I think there's 4 or 5 cash receivers personally, and we just covered all of them. So in tournaments, though, there's definitely a lot of interesting options. We mentioned CeeDee Lamb, who's going to have ownership. Obviously, he's a great play, slate breaking upside, and one of the best game environments on the slate. So I definitely love him. Jamar Chase is 7,200, and he's going to come in with 10 to 15% ownership, easily stacks well with Joe Burrow, right? I don't know. I love Jamar Chase. Diggs, I think, is in a very good spot. This is the range where you want to be in just in terms of pivots off of these top guys, and all of these guys, in my opinion, have the same type of ceiling.
What do our odd even week splits say about Jamar Chase this week? Have we checked the model?
The model says it is an odd week, which is in favor of a Jamar Chase blow up game. So
can we check the game log here? Just I need to verify what the model says. Need to run the numbers.
So on every even week, he scores 13 points.
Mm-hmm.
On every odd week, either you're going to get either less or more than that, right? The last two, the last odd week wasn't great. He scored 9 points. They had a bye week in week 10, but week 11 now, odd week once again, in a great spot against Las Vegas. You're going to get ownership leverage on this entire game. It's definitely the game to pivot to and play as the contrarian game stack in that 4 p.m. window. Jamar Chase, blow-up game incoming. 30-plus DraftKings points. Jamar Chase, book it. Calling it right now.
And he's going to be like 15% compared to like Tyreek and Adams, who are going to be like around 30. So I absolutely love it. I think he's the clear, easy pivot that you make if you're behind late, and I think that you can just play him straight up. He's leverage off of T. Higgins, who's going to be a lot higher owned. There's nothing not great about Jamar Chase. He's definitely my favorite wide receiver for GPPs in that range. Metcalf ? Nah, I don't want to play that game. I had thought about it early, but if Kyler Murray's not going to play and it looks like that's the case, then I just don't want to play anybody in this game, especially somebody at that price tag when there are so many high value pay up options this week. I don't want to burn so much salary on Metcalf.
And you're not really getting an ownership discount on him. He's going to be over 10%.
Right. Yeah, he's not as sneaky as we would like him to be. Thoughts on Brandon Cooks? Yeah, we talked about it on the podcast this week. Cooks is one of those guys who's always going to project well, but you can always justify not playing him by just saying he's a piece of the Houston Texans offense, and fading Texans is probably the smart way to go on a week-to-week basis. I don't hate Brandon Cooks if you're going to play like a Tannehill stack and maybe you want the Tennessee to be pushed a little bit, but I don't know. It's really hard. I think that there are some better options for cheaper and some better options for a little bit more. So he's just kind of in a price range that I think I'm going to be avoiding largely.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Cooks is a pretty good play, and it's obviously a good spot going up against Tennessee, which, as you could see on the screen, is giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers. They give up over 46 DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. So it's a great spot. Obviously, the touchdown expectation is just so low with the Houston Texans offense. And that, like you said, is the reason to justify not playing him is he's on the Texans. He's going to be catching passes from, Tyrod Taylor, right? It's not great, but $6K, it's a good price. I don't know. I think he's a fine GPP play, but he is going to come in over 10% owned. So you're not getting, a great discount on him.
And
Tyler Lockett,
a rain game. per the commission, Nashville 100% a chance of rain. So
Tyler Lockett is 6K as well, and he's projecting for like 15% ownership, easy fade. Although he did have his little 43-point game last year against the Cardinals, so maybe he can replicate that. Maybe he's the Cardinal killer.
Also had league leading air yards in last week's game, so that's interesting to think about. Maybe he's a smash waiting to happen, and we're going to be talking on the Monday podcast. Okay. Like, dude, can't believe we didn't play Tyreek Hill. Or
let me take that back. He's not a fade because he is your prototypical GPP receiver. He's the receiver that you want to be playing in large field tournaments. You're either going to bust or you're going to fucking sail to the money with Tyler Lockett. And that's how you should be playing tournaments, right? Like you got to be playing for first. And Tyler Lockett is the definition of a GPP wide receiver.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
First or worst.
So I guess you do have to play some Tyler Lockett, especially at 6K.
What's your cash game core? Quarterback, it's Prescott and Mahomes. Running back, it's Dylan, CMC, and then a value running back, whether that's Ingram, Gaskin, or Jeff Wilson Jr. And at wide receiver, it's a very tight Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Rashad Bateman, Michael Gallup, maybe Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams. Yeah, like other than that, I don't think that you get too crazy, and we'll get to tight end very shortly. Any other wide receivers? I've got a couple, but who else do you like for wide receiver in tournaments?
I mean, I think this range is kind of ugly, like with Kirk, Renfro, DJ Moore. Don't really have any interest in that. I mean, DJ Moore is 5,900. God damn, but this man just hasn't produced. And we talked about it, but he's hit his quota for touchdowns on the year. Mm-hmm. So can expect him to not score another one, right? 3 is the most that he's had in any season, right, of his career.
Indeed.
He only scores 3 touchdowns in any given season. So don't have too much interest in him. Jalen Waddle, I mean, you mentioned him. He's interesting, 5,600. He's projecting really well. Definitely don't mind him, but I don't know. Other than that, I don't have much interest in these mid-range receivers. I mean, Darnell Mooney with no A-Rob it's pretty intriguing.
That's what I was going to say. I really have been coming around to Darnell Mooney. I mean, he's the type of explosive player that could have gotten there anyways, but from a DraftKings perspective, no Allen Robinson, which condenses the target share. Justin Fields has had an extra week to get a little bit better coming off the bye. We've already mentioned everything with the Ravens. You mentioned how the Ravens have one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, and nobody's talking about it. Darnell Mooney's ownership is not going to reflect a player who has a high ceiling, who has a condensed target share, and who has an immaculate matchup. And he has supreme leverage off of Cole Kmet, who's going to be one of the highest owned tight ends on the slate. So I don't know. Darnell Mooney to me really stands out. I think that you can play him as a piece of a Lamar Jackson stack if Lamar Jackson stacks are a thing. And I think that he makes for a pretty good one-off as well. A good pivot off of lineups where you're not playing T. Higgins in that price range.
Yep, I definitely agree. I mean, just for all the reasons that you said, he's one of the best leverage plays on the slate. Leverage off of Higgins in the same range, leverage off of Cole Kmet. So definitely like Darnell Mooney quite a bit. Other than that, I don't really have anybody else that
I'll throw out two final ones here. At the very bottom of the barrel, if you're trying to flip the build completely and just stone punt it off, I think you can go with Marcus Johnson for the Tennessee Titans. He's got a great matchup this week. I think he's going to be dominating snaps. He's really won over that wide receiver 2 spot for Tennessee. So I like Marcus Johnson a little bit, just for the salary savings, and it puts you on a contrarian lineup build. So I think he's good for tournaments. And then also Cedric Wilson. I mean, maybe you're going to be wanting to find really low owned pieces when you're game stacking this game. There aren't that many of them. Gallup's going to be owned, Lamb's going to be owned. Both quarterbacks are going to be owned. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, like they're all going to be owned. But Cedric Wilson probably won't be. He's had multiple touchdown games in the past. He doesn't need too much to get there. If you're playing him with Dak, maybe a touchdown and a couple catches, and he should be seeing elevated snaps without Amari Cooper. He should be the primary slot receiver for the Cowboys in this spot. So I like Cedric Wilson as just a stone cold punt, strictly as a correlated piece when you're trying to get different with your Cowboys KC builds.
Yeah, no, definitely a good punt with Cedric Wilson, and I like Marcus Johnson as well. I honestly think Marcus Johnson, would have been cash viable had this been, a different slate where we didn't have the running back value. Let's say if like Elijah Mitchell played and Kamara played, like Marcus Johnson 100% would have been in play at 3,500. So don't mind him in GPPs, and I do like targeting the Titans quite a bit in tournaments, and I also like the Niners as well. So Brandon Ayuk is 5K. Debo Samuel, we already talked about up at the top. It's just a good spot for the 49ers passing offense, going up against Jacksonville. Jacksonville has a pretty good run defense. They're 7th in terms of DVOA, and they are 31st in terms of passing DVOA. So Jacksonville is quietly a pass funnel, and I think it's a very good spot for the Niners pass catching options, and they're good leverage off of Jeff Wilson Jr., who's going to be like the highest owned player on the entire slate.
Yep, I agree. Let's transition to tight end, where we can find another player who I think is great leverage off of Jeff Wilson Jr. My favorite, I'll just start off with GPPs. My favorite tight end play this week is George Kittle. I don't know how you feel about George Kittle this week, but I think he's amazing leverage. I think Jacksonville has been beaten by tight ends to this point this year, and Kittle just looks amazing. The targets have been there. We saw him get a 100-yard game in his first spot back after missing some time. And I just think that, the other guys are going to have more ownership. So if you're going to pay up to be contrarian, I think that Kittle is the guy you do it with, especially because he's offering you huge leverage off of a chalky running back that we think is a good fade in tournaments. Whereas Travis Kelce, you're just buying into more chalk. Darren Waller, you're buying into more chalk. George Kittle, you're being contrarian, you're getting leverage, and the ceiling is equal to those other guys. So for tournaments, George Kittle, I think, is a super, super interesting piece of this 49ers game.
Yeah, George Kittle is definitely the GPP, GOAT play of the week. Especially when Kelce and Waller, who he sandwiched in between, are going to be much higher owned. It's a great spot for George Kittle for everything, that we've just mentioned. And I definitely think this could be an eruption game for Kittle. So I definitely love him in GPPs. I mean, Kelce is fine. If you're game stacking that game, he's obviously in play. In terms of cash for tight ends, I think you just punt it off with John Bates.
Let's talk about Bates versus Komet, because it's an interesting conversation. I think more people play Komet than play Bates.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we'll talk about defense here shortly, and somebody in the chat asked like who's the cheapest defense this week, but a lot of people are going to look to pay up to defense this week. So I think the build is I think one of the builds that's going to be very popular is playing Tua, playing Komet, playing more expensive defense rather than saving the 900 off of Komet with John Bates. Obviously, it's a tough spot going up against Carolina. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL, but we've seen it all season, right? The Washington football team just funnels targets to the tight end position. It doesn't matter who's out there. It doesn't matter if it's Logan Thomas, Ricky Seals-Jones, John Bates. I firmly believe that he is just going to be a 99%, 95% snap player. They don't have anybody else on the depth chart that's even worth a damn behind John Bates. He's a 4th-round pick, and he's going to get targets. I mean, he's stone min.
We saw it last week. As soon as RSJ got out, they didn't miss a beat. Dude got 3 targets in that game, and they've known since Friday that RSJ wasn't going to play. Like, John Bates is going to get targets. So 5 targets at the tight end position, which I think is something that we could expect for Bates. 2,500 doesn't get easier than that when it comes to DraftKings cash games, especially in a week where you're paying up for multiple players above 8K in your cash game lineup. So you just play John Bates. You take the salary savings. It's like Cole Kmet is fine. I get all the reasons why you like Kmet. Like, I think Kmet is a good play. I have no issue with playing Cole Kmet, but I just think that it allows you to get off to and get up to one of the better quarterback plays. And for that reason, it makes all the sense in the world to just go with John Bates and cash.
Yeah, I mean,
It's that
we
simple.
like if this was Ricky Seals-Jones,
Yeah.
we'd lock him in, right? 100%.
Yeah.
And John Bates and Ricky Seals-Jones are kind of like the same type of tight end. You know, they're somewhat decently athletic in terms of their player profiler. Like you're not really losing much by going to John Bates as your tight end one off of Ricky Seals-Jones, that is. So I'm playing him in cash. I don't hate the people that want to play Kmet. I think Kmet is a great play this week. He's 3,400. And, you know, if I could play him, I would. Obviously, I prefer Kmet to John Bates straight up. But when you take into consideration the $900 you're saving, I mean, I'll punt it off at tight end 10 out of 10 in cash games. And that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, and in tournaments, I don't mind doing it either because Cole Kmet is going to be roughly, 20% owned, and Bates is going to be under 5. Simple. It's simple. Easy game. Sometimes it's an easy game.
Nah, I mean, in tournaments, I probably won't play John Bates just because
Are you going to play Kmet?
the upside is so low. Probably won't play Kmet either. I'll just look for, some pivots in that range. I don't mind Troutman, actually. It is a good spot going up against this Eagles defense that gives up the most catches per game to tight ends. They give up the most DraftKings points per game to tight ends, the Eagles, that is. So Adam Troutman, who has seen quite a bit of targets over the last 3 weeks, I think is the clear-cut pivot off of Kmet in GPPs as just a one-off. And then I like to just get up into this 4K range. You got Dawson Knox. You can include him as in part of your Josh Allen stacks. You got Goddard, who is a target guy. You got Dan Arnold, who is like the Jags wide receiver 1 now. And Dan Arnold, he's 4,100, a little bit pricey, but 8, 7, 10. Like, that's elite usage for a tight end at 4,100, right? So you got some pivots for a couple $100 cheaper off of the Cole Kmet chalk. But I mean, I think Cole Kmet is a pretty good play either way. Like we talked about, the Ravens' pass defense is not good. And they're bad against tight ends as well.
And Njoku or Hooper? I mean, God.
Neither.
Neither?
If I had to pick one, Hooper.
Yeah.
I mean, no. I'm assuming for GPPs, I would go with Njoku. Just more upside. PSM.
Yeah, I mean, there's easier ways to burn money. Lighter, fire pit, put it in like the toaster oven, turn it all the way up. Like you don't have to go through playing Njoku. Should
play Norman Bates.
Hey, Bates Motel was a good show.
Never seen it.
Wow. Another tight end, you mentioned Dawson Knox, who's one of my favorites, but strictly part of a Josh Allen stack. Another guy that I like that is completely flying under the radar, sub 5% ownership, is CJ Uzomah, who I think is good leverage off of T. Higgins. I think you can play him in lineups with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Uzomah as a double stack, which gets your Higgins chalk, mixes in some lower owned pieces with your Higgins chalk. And I think you could play like a Burrow double with like Chase and Uzomah, where you fade T. Higgins and you're getting just ultimate leverage off of one of the highest owned players on the slate. The Raiders have given up the second most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. They've been getting beaten by tight ends all year. They're like right up there, negligible with the amount that the Eagles have given up, more than the Ravens. And everyone's hyped to play Kmet against this Ravens defense. Like Uzomah's spot is even better. So I like Uzomah at 3,500. More times than not, he's going to give you nothing, but he does have 2 games this year with 24 points or more on DraftKings. And if he gets you that, you're absolutely smashing. And this is a good spot for you, Zoma, to put up points. So I like him at 3,500, sub 5% owned for tournaments.
Yeah, he's definitely a good pivot off Komet. And I mean, we talk about it every week, but the tight end spot is just a spot where you want to correlate, right? You either want to make it a part of your game stack or make it your bring back. And you probably want to save salary. Doesn't really matter who you play. Like, I know we're going over individual players. It's tight ends, man. Like, we're like the OG just tight end haters.
Definitely.
In
Before
the
it was
DFS
cool.
space.
Before it was cool, we were.
Bro, we've been on this for the last 3 years. We don't pay up for tight ends. And like, I definitely like Kelsey, Kittle, Waller this week, but in most weeks, they're just not going to do enough to separate from the field. It's just that simple, especially this year. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on with Waller, but the man sucks. Kittle, obviously he missed some time, but he's still great. And, you know, majority of the time he's going to score 16, 17 at an elevated price tag. Like, it doesn't get much easier than not playing them, you know?
Yeah.
And you just take the 10 out of a 3K guy, and it correlates well with your lineups too, because a lot of the great quarterbacks have these cheap tight ends.
Yeah, so I mean, think about it like, you know, Kittle's probably going to put up, you know, 130+ point game per year. Maybe we lose that week. You know, Waller's going to put up 130+ point game per year. We're going to lose that week. Kelsey might do it twice. But if we're fading tight ends in 18 weeks and we're losing in 4 out of those, that's a winning proposition to me. It really comes down to that. Ricky goes back to running back and asks Dylan, Wilson, and Ingram the cash running backs. I mean, they're all cash viable. Dylan's a lock. Wilson and Ingram are in play, but you definitely need to type in the words or the letters CMC and include that in the message, because CMC is a stone cold lock.
Yeah, I don't see how you don't play Christian McCaffrey tomorrow
Yeah,
in cash games at least.
Yeah, you have to. And in tournaments.
Man's usage is just out of this world, dude. Like,
yeah.
I don't understand. But I think we can move on to defense. Bring it up. Cheapest defense of the week. I mean, it's a defense. You just save money.
Yeah, I mean, I would play the Chiefs. I would play the Jets. I'd play.
If I had to, I'd play the fucking Texans. I don't care. It's just all about saving salary and you know, boosting the floor and ceiling combo on your lineup with your skill position players. That's just the thesis of it. And say this every week. I don't know if people ever just actually think about it, but there's no correlation between like ownership and fantasy points and salary and fantasy points. It's just a crapshoot. You know, if I had to pick one, obviously I'm picking the Browns at 3,100, and that's the defense that people are going to play, and that's going to be chalk in cash. And you know, we had that week a couple weeks ago where the Cardinals D against the Texans was like 3K, and I said like, all right, they're a must lock. Like, I would say the Browns would be in that if the salary wasn't so tight this week. So I definitely think going down in this range, I like Washington. They have a good D-line versus O-line matchup in this spot. Don't mind that. Jets D, Tua's going to pass the ball a ton. You know, maybe they luck into a pick six or a couple sacks, right? So right now, I think the Jets D is probably going to be in my cash game lineup. Like, I don't care about defense.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of pass volume against the Jets from a suboptimal quarterback at a really good price. And especially it's low-key leverage too, because you're betting against Tua in that spot, who's going to be pretty highly owned. So I'm very content playing the Jets. I also like the Cowboys from a game theory perspective, because I think in lineups where you're fading that game going nuts, the only way that game doesn't go nuts is if Dallas is winning and the Chiefs offense is failing. So in that spot, Dallas D is probably doing okay. So I like that specifically in lineups where you're fading monster output from that game, but that's strictly a game theory play. Obviously, the Browns are like the best D on the board. Yeah, I don't know. And Jared S, just going back to the CMC thing, won't Cam vulture touchdowns from CMC? I mean, maybe, but CMC, like it's hard to quantify, like just speaking, but like CMC had 26.5 DraftKings points when he got vultured 3 times at the goal line and fell 5 yards short of the rushing bonus and barely played in the second half because that's how badly Carolina was stomping on the Cardinals last week. Like, this man had the worst run out you could possibly imagine and put up 26 DraftKings points.
And 26 is a fuck ton.
Yeah.
Like, don't get it twisted. Like, we say, like, we're saying it like it's normal. Like, 26 DraftKings points is a lot of points for any player. And he ran bad. Like, scored 26 and ran bad. And he's 8,900. The man's not even over 9K. I'd probably play CMC if he was 10K.
Yeah.
We're getting him at 8,900. DraftKings makes no sense.
Look at that! Look at that smile on his face. That's how I'm gonna be looking tomorrow after I played him in all my lineups. Just like,
bruh, elite. I can't fade CMC in cash, but
we got a season long question. Hey, bro, got offered this trade. I receive Eckler, Godwin, Pittman. I give up Evans, Zeke, Keenan. Should I take it full PPR?
It's close.
I think Godwin and Evans are kind of a wash.
Eckler above Zeke.
Yeah, Pittman and Keenan are kind of like, I would almost say a wash at this point, and I think I prefer Eckler to Zeke. So to me, I think I'm going that Eckler, Godwin, Pittman side.
Yeah, me too. But all right, defense. I definitely I won't say I like a GPP winning defense this week, same as last week. Eagles D at home against the Saints, against Trevor Siemian. They're missing Teron Armstead. They're missing Ryan Ramczyk. They're 2 starting tackles. The D line versus O line mismatch in this spot for the Eagles is one of the best on the entire slate. They're not going to have any ownership. Eagles D 2,900 GPP winner. Book it. And Panthers D, but they're going to be chalky. But I love Panthers D and Eagles D this week.
Yeah. I really don't have very many thoughts. Like, I agree with you on both of those, but like for me, I don't even really like think about defense. Like, I just use it to save salary. It's that easy.
I mean, in GPPs, you kind of have to put a little thought into defense.
Yeah, make sure it doesn't negatively correlate with your lineup. Make sure that you're building things in a unique way. Like, you don't play the highest owned defenses. You know, maybe you try and pick leverage spots, like I said with the Cowboys, where like if they're succeeding, other people's highly owned pieces are maybe failing. So I like stuff like that. But in general, like it's wasted thought. Like you could be thinking about other things with that time, you know?
Yeah.
Thinking about like what I'm gonna be getting for dinner tomorrow. Like shit like that's more important.
What's up? Jeff Wilson or Devonta Smith? Jeff Wilson.
Yep.
Ownership sucks. Browns D. I mean, Browns D is the best defensive play on the slate. But, you know, how do we score points on defense, right? We score points by having a ton of dropbacks where they get sacks, fumbles, interceptions. With Dan Campbell calling plays, with Tim Boyle starting, how many dropbacks can we realistically project for Tim Boyle to have in this spot? 20, 25 at most, which obviously the Browns D can still get there on those 20 pass attempts, 20 dropbacks, whatever. But they're just going to run the ball. Like, they're just going to run DeAndre Swift. Is Jamal Williams back?
Jamal Williams is listed as questionable, has been sidelined for 2 games, but appears to have a better chance of playing this week after practicing on a limited basis Wednesday through Friday. I think Jamal Williams is back.
All right, so you have DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams who are going to combine for like 40 rushing attempts in this spot.
Rainstorm. So like exactly, as Joey's making the point, I think that rain games usually translate to more rush attempts, which should lower the ceiling perspective of a defense. So like you're just eating into a lot of rushing attempts and high ownership with the Browns defense in tournaments. I don't think it's worth it, but I do think that you can go there and cash if it fits your build.
Rain likely plus a 10 to 15 mile per hour wind, just not ideal conditions for throwing the football. You can't really score a lot of defensive fantasy points by having the opposing team running the football, I will say. So something to think about for GPPs. I probably won't have much Browns D. I mean, I'll play them some, but not much.
Mm-hmm. And I think that about covers our position by position breakdown. We've talked about the stacks we like. We've talked about the leverage spots that we like. If you guys have any more questions, I feel like now would be the time to get them in. Probably stick around for a few more minutes before we get out of here. I don't know. Is there anything else that you feel like you didn't mention that we need to get out to the people before we get out?
Yeah, I definitely like Josh Allen stacks as contrarian builds, especially early. You got Josh Allen is 8,100, Diggs 79, and then I think Cole Beasley will set up well in this spot for the type of defense that the Colts play. That cover 2 zone defense, middle of the field will be open, and honestly, I could see this being a week where the Josh Allen doubles win tournaments. And even the low salary Josh Allen double with Sanders and Cole Beasley. I mean, we've seen it win before. Obviously, fading Diggs in the spot is tough, but at 7,900, he's pretty expensive. I definitely like him as a GPP play, but Josh Allen doubles, I mean, include Diggs in there, I think could be a GPP winner.
How are you not even going to mention Gabe, though? I was just waiting for you to say his name. You're talking about all these other dudes.
Where's Gabriel Davis on here?
He is priced at $3,900. Coming off of a 100-point game, coming off a game where he finally is starting to take over some more snaps in this offense. The Bills lost to Jacksonville. They had to look in the mirror. They had to ask themselves what was wrong. Why is our offense broken? And they came to one conclusion. It was the only conclusion you could come to. Not enough Gabe. And they got Gabe more involved, and it paid off in a big way. I think they go right back to him this week.
I don't think so. They were just up big. Pat's going to give the Bills a run for the division?
Absolutely not.
What do
you think? You think so?
It's looking like it. We're 7-4. The Bills are 6-3. Got a couple of big division games coming up. I think the Patriots and Bills will split 1-1. And then it comes down to who runs or who wins more games out of the rest of the games remaining. Maybe the Patriots sneak out a division victory. I mean, if the Bills are losing to the Jags, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the Patriots win the division. And the Patriots have a top 5 defense in the NFL. So just throw it back to when Ben put the Patriots in the same tier as the Lions and the Texans, like a stone idiot.
Yeah, I mean, I just like to troll the Patriots. Gets a reaction out of Joey. It's good for the content. I could care less about who's winning in any game in the NFL at any time. I'm just trying to win some money.
That is facts. That is facts.
Anything else here? I'm trying to think. Did I miss any of my amazing plays? I touched on Darnell Mooney, touched on JT.
Well, who's your GPP winner this week? We can end on that.
I think it's a Bill stack that includes Jonathan Taylor. I like Dawson Knox and Steph Diggs as my favorite double. And Yeah, I mean, my favorite one-off is Darnell Mooney. My favorite tight end pivot is CJ Uzoma. I've touched on all these guys throughout the stream, so you guys know where I'm going in tournaments to get different, and I think that I don't want it to get lost because I feel like we didn't really talk too much about the Dallas KC game because it's so obvious, but I do feel like the chances of it being the winning game stack is still significantly higher than any other stack that you could make on the build. So just because we kind of washed over it because of the obviousness of it, I don't want it to get lost in how superior that game is to the rest of the games on the slate. And I think it's very important that you are cognizant of that when you're building your teams. You don't want to be leaving this game out.
Yeah, I mean, you got to play KC, Dallas. It's that simple. I mean, there's going to be some spots to leverage the field on. We talked about it: Zeke, Cedric Wilson, the
Dalton
cheap.
Schultz.
Yep, Dalton Schultz, the cheap Kansas City guys like Byron Pringle, McCole Hardman is 3,700. So there's some leverage spots in terms of ownership, and there's some good pivots off of some other chalky guys. Oh, Hardman is 4K. I thought he was a little bit cheaper than that, but Hardman would be a pivot off of Michael Gallup, pivot off of Rashad Bateman, low ownership. Byron Pringle, 3,400 cheap, ran the second most routes out of any Chiefs wide receiver last week. So maybe we've seen Byron Pringle become the Chiefs wide receiver too, if that holds up. And CeeDee Lamb, Dak, they're all great plays. I mean, Dak is projecting for, let me look at this. Dak is projecting for 7% ownership right now, which is like the seventh most on the slate. I mean, I don't think that's right, but if that is right, like Dak as the 8th or 7th highest owned quarterback is just a stone nuts.
I don't see how it could be with Gallup's ownership and CeeDee Lamb's ownership, but
Yeah,
maybe
he'll get carried up by his wide receivers. We've kind of seen that over the last couple of weeks, but guess we can end the stream with you touting CEH.
Nah. I would love to for the bit, but you can't play CEH for sure. But I do think that CEH muddles Darrell Williams enough that you can't play him either. I mean, yeah, I don't know. For me, it's a stay away from both running backs in this spot.
Okay.
I guess that is going to be it for the Week 11 edition of the Saturday night late night live stream brought to you by the DFS Dose. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you are new here, drop a subscription on the YouTube channel, like the video. It helps us out a ton. We appreciate you guys. Like, seriously, doing these streams is the best. So we appreciate you guys a lot. We have podcasts that drop multiple times per week. You can find those on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Podcast Addict, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And do not forget to join the Discord chat if you ever want to hit us up any time of the week. We're always in the Discord chat. Sunday morning, you want our thoughts, how things have changed in between now and tomorrow. Discord, it's free to join. Link is in the description, and we're always in there. So that is going to be it. We hope you guys have a great week, and we will talk to you this week. We're probably going to do a second stream, right, for Thanksgiving?
Video stream. Some. Thanksgiving coming up, Turkey Day. It's going to be lit.
Yeah. If you guys want us to do a Thanksgiving stream, hit us up, on Twitter, on Discord. Let us know. If enough people hit us up, we'll do it.
Yeah, it'd be Wednesday night.
Wednesday night live stream. I fucks with it. We could do that. Signing out, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.